Hey everyone, what's going on? It's your favorite reconciler of the people. And I've had a few things on my mind lately, and one of those things is um learning the difference between forgiveness and reconciliation, or I guess you could say forgiveness versus reconciliation. Now, I think our culture tends to conflate the two in the sense that, you know, we use them interchangeably. For a lot of people, forgiveness means reconciliation. Um, when that's not necessarily the case. Just because you forgive someone of something doesn't mean you will reconcile with them. I like the phrase, I forgive, but I don't forget. Um, Now, one kind of toxic thing I think about our culture is that because of this conflation that we do with the terms, I think it's become pretty common, especially with like, I don't know, psychological speak, psych speak, therapy talk and stuff like that, to just kind of automatically pin it to some pathological disorder or condition, um, and be like, yeah, therefore, I can't reconcile with this person or forgive this person ever, right? You hear a lot of advice online, especially that's like, oh, someone did you wrong? Well, then, just cut them out of your life completely. Which, I have to be honest, as someone that supports community, I don't think is the right call for most cases. Now, relax again. I'm not saying there aren't cases in which a step like that might actually be necessary, especially if they've shown a repeated pattern of like toxic behavior and stuff like that, of course, right? But I think we as a culture, just because, like, again, we really don't have communitarian values, if we're being honest, like values which forgive and support each other. um we've become all too quick to use. And while I understand, for example, when people say that, oh, cancel culture is just accountability, and again, to an extent I agree, but like, I don't know, the other part of me says that we have to give room for people to grow, and forgiveness comes alongside that. Now, again, there are serious stuff like, especially things involving children, which obviously, man, like, that's fully cancelable. I think we can all agree on that. Um, but yeah, I just don't see a lot of forgiveness, a lot of even attempts at reconciliation. I know not everything can be reconciled, um, but you should at least make an attempt. Sometimes it's out of your hands, right? But at least an attempt should be made. But I have to be honest also, like, just on a personal level, understanding or getting to know the difference as I've gotten older has really put my own mistakes even into perspective. Like, I used to really like dwell on mistakes I've made, especially and the wrong things I've done with people, because once again, as I always say, despite my being disabled, I'm still human. I still make mistakes. It's allowed me to sort of be more empathetic towards people that I've hurt, and like be like, oh yeah, I can understand why they would because I have had that said to me, like, I forgive you, it's okay, but like, I can't forget what you did to me, and I prefer not to be in communication with you or to talk with you. And again, I used to like beat myself up about that. I used to like um just spiral basically, and which would of course only lead me to make even more mistakes, and have anger in my heart. But after a certain point, especially as I got into my mid 20s, I just like I started to really question, or even in my early 20s, as I started to become more social and go to college and stuff like that, like, you know, why am I really angry? Why do I feel this way towards others, especially women, not gonna lie? And, you know, as I started to get more educated, I started to really understand the systems, capitalism, ableism, that allowed these things to happen. And um you know what, again, I made mistakes, but because of those things that I mentioned, I do feel, and I've always said this, that I've been treated unfairly by people and not given the same chances slash forgiveness as others. That's 100% true. I don't think, regardless of your political persuasion, you would deny that, especially on a relational level, in terms of friendships and relationships, that's a lie for especially visibly disabled people. If you think that, then you're like, as I've said here before, you're living in. If you don't think that, you're living in La La Land. I'm just gonna be real, but like, you know, after I started learning about the systems, I, you know, I shifted a lot of my, let's say, um, resentment and anger towards not the individual people, because it's not, people only act in ableist ways uh because of fear, or because of the fact that that's the only thing that they've been taught, because these systems are ingrained into our society, and they affect the way in which we approach these things. So I started to say, you know what, I think it's healthier to direct these feelings towards that. But even then, I still wasn't taking it towards action. And I'm happy to say I won't say too much because of the current administration and things that are going on in my life, that I have transferred a lot of that now into action through volunteering for certain organizations. Again, I don't want to say which ones, but you know, I mean, I've fully forgiven the people that hurt me, and I hope that the people that I've hurt can find it in their heart to forgive me as well. But, and here's the important part, that doesn't mean that we can ever reconcile, right? And usually, if there is some sort of reconciliation, it comes with some sort of boundary, right? Where, um, let's say, for example, this is a common one, especially in like when I've tried dating people. It's like, you know, either we're not compatible or you messed up in this way, so now I'm gonna put a firm boundary. We can be friends, but we can never uh like get to the point of, for example, being romantic partners or whatever. I've had that done to me, and I've also done that to others, which I think it again is perfectly healthy. Um because yeah, certain things you can't recover from them. They're irreconcilable. They're not unforgivable, but they are irreconcilable. Um and I have to be honest, that's the way I feel about the able-bodied community as far as their treatment towards the disabled community goes. Like, I I've forgiven them enough to re-recognize their humanity, because I am a human being first and I try to be kind to everyone. But in terms of, as I've said, me building a life alongside the able-bodied and stuff like that, I don't see that happening under any sort of socioeconomic system, be that capitalism, socialism, whatever. I've also been honest about that, because I think that, it's more of a social problem that needs to get to the roots of our physiological and evolutionary disdain towards disability. We need to deal with that first before any notion of, you know, dealing with other things can truly cause us to be integrated into the able-bodied society. Um and if someone needs help or whatever, if someone asks me for help, I'm not going to say no, right? Doesn't matter what their ability level or stuff is, but like I'm talking, big picture and stuff like that. I think that the able-bodied community has been too willing to reconcile with a population that, at best either shows or open hostility or fear towards them still, or just flat out pity, not actual recognition of our full humanity. And like I said, I can't reconcile with a population like that personally. I've forgiven them. I have many, many great disabled friends. Obviously, it's kind of impossible um not to do that as a disabled person, because at some point you're gonna have to have help from them. But I dream of a future where we own our own things, we own our own property, and can, have our own families within the disability culture, and not be pressured to like conform to their standards. But, and here's the thing, normal disability rights people would say, oh, you need to do it as an individual. But as you guys know, I feel like that's kind of propaganda, as I talked about with the American dream. So, like, yeah, we need to move beyond the 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 framing of integration from the 1970s disability movement. That's the best way I can put it, because as we're seeing right now, we see that our rights are extremely vulnerable to attack. And it's precisely because we've been so accommodating to the able bodied that we've ended up in this position. Um but again, understanding the the difference and the role that both forgiveness versus reconciliation play in relationships has really made me understand that. Anyway, um those are just my 2 cents on uh the relational issues between those two concepts from a disabled perspective. All right, see you. Bye.